Good morning, everyone. I see many familiar names and want to thank you for joining us for this virtual event. And for those new to the Data User Conference, welcome. We wish we could be in person for this year's conference, and we hope to welcome you all to Penn State Harrisburg's campus for next year's conference. For those who don't know me, I'm Jennifer Schultz, the Data Services Manager for the Pennsylvania State Data Center. I will be moderating our event today. Tim Schock, Data Analyst for the Center, is joining me, and he will be organizing your questions for our presenters. A big thanks to Tim for his help in organizing this year's conference. A few housekeeping items. Our presenters will all be leaving time for your questions, and we ask that you place your questions in the chat. Also, please note that sessions are being recorded today and will be available next week on the website. We will have a short break between each session, and then we will break for lunch from 1 to 2. Our presenters today will be sharing important information related to the 2020 census and census surveys, products, and tools. Presentation topics and presenter bios are available on the conference website, and the presentation slides and the recordings will be posted to the site next week. A big thank you to our presenters for taking the time to share their experience with us today. I'd also like to thank the Data Center and Penn State Harrisburg staff for helping me plan and present today's sessions. Thanks to Barb LaFleur from the Census Bureau for helping recruit our speakers for today's event. And most importantly, thank you all for joining us today. Today's conference is a live event in Microsoft Teams. This is our first time using this platform, so please bear with us as we work through the transitions between presenters. Now let's welcome our first presenter, Jenny Karalevich. Jenny is the lead redistricting program specialist in the Redistricting and Voting Rights Data Office. She will be sharing updates in census operations and redistricting. And I would just like to personally thank Jenny for assisting our office as we prepared Pennsylvania's data for the Redistricting Data program. Her knowledge and experience were invaluable. Welcome, Jenny. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for the very kind words. I appreciate them, and I enjoyed working with you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and open my presentation. And while I open it, I do have to say that I am a proud Pennsylvania native. I'm currently in Pittsburgh actually right now, and I did graduate from Penn State. So I like to add that to the discourse. So again, I'm happy to be here. So can everyone see my slides?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So again, I'm happy to be here, and like Jennifer mentioned, I'm going to discuss updates in census operations and redistricting with you guys today. So for my agenda, I do want to go over some census operation updates, including a few maps regarding self-response to the 2020 census, apportionment, and some maps dealing with resident population. Then I'm going to jump into the 2020 Redistricting Data Program updates, including Geographic Updates, Census Blocks, and some data delivery topics, including the new Redistricting Data Summary File releases coming later this year. So let's start it off. 2020 Census, we got through it. So on this slide, I went to our self-response mapper for the census, and I wanted to see how Pennsylvania responded to the census. As many of you know, this was the first year that you could respond to the census on the internet. So we do have a lot of self-response by county statistics to share. So for everyone responding to the census, we recorded 99.9% of Pennsylvania households that were enumerated. And of this 99.9%, 69.6% of the households self-responded, and that includes the new option to respond by the internet, as well as traditional options, including filling out a paper census form or responding to the census via a call center. 39.5% of housing units were enumerated during our non-response follow-up operations. So in terms of self-response, of the 69.6% of the housing units that self-responded, 54.3 of these responded online, and 45.7 responded by traditional methods, paper or phone. So you can see on the map on the right, I know it's a little tiny, but the color scale goes from deep orange for low self-response rates to deep blue for high self-response rates. So the counties that had the highest self-response rates included Bucks with 79.5, Chester County with almost 78%, and Montgomery with almost 78%. Since this is since I'm a geographer, I like to present maps just to start the conversation, and it's a great way to share data. So come with me on this ride for a few slides. So I went, again, I accessed the following maps I'm going to show you from the census website. I have the links at the end of the presentation if you're interested in looking. So apportionment is a very hot topic. The apportionment numbers were released in the last week of April this year. And apportionment is divvying up the 435 congressional district seats among the states. So I'm sure you guys know in 2020, based on the apportionment numbers, Pennsylvania has 17 congressional states. And in 2010, there were 18. So there was a loss of 1 seat for Pennsylvania. So while we talk about apportionment, I really like this slide because apportionment and redistricting sometimes are used interchangeably, and I just kind of want to set the stage for that. So when we're talking about apportionment, it's done at the state level. And the people who are included in the apportionment counts are the resident population and the federally affiliated count overseas. The federally affiliated count overseas includes military personnel and civilian federal employees who are stationed outside the 50 states, District of Columbia, or Puerto Rico. When we report the apportionment numbers, it's total population only per state, and there's no disclosure avoidance methodology that's run on the apportionment numbers. When we talk about redistricting, redistricting can happen at the state level, the largest level, and also at the block level. In terms of redistricting numbers, we only include the resident population. We report out on race, ethnicity, and select housing characteristics, and disclosure avoidance is performed on the data. We use the differentially private top-down algorithm. Michael Haas will be presenting after me, and he is the disclosure avoidance guru. So he'll be able to get more into the disclosure avoidance processing. So our third map today is the 2020 resident population for the 50 states, District of Columbia, and Puerto Rico. And you can see for the United States, the resident population is 331,449,281. And in Pennsylvania, the 2020 resident population is just over 13 million at 13,002,700. So when we look at the percent change in resident population for the 50 states, District of Columbia and Puerto Rico from 2010 to 2020, the 2010 resident population was 12,702,379. So there was a 2.4% increase in the population of Pennsylvania from 2010 to 2020. So I went over the census operation maps, and now I'm going to take a deeper dive into the redistricting data program. I'm sure many of you have seen this slide. This is one of the, I'd say, bedrocks of our redistricting data presentations, but it's very important to set the stage about what we're actually talking about. So the redistricting data program is enacted by Public Law 94-171. So what we want to do is we provide the states an opportunity to identify their small areas, their geographic areas, which they need tabulations of population to perform their redistricting. And we need to get the data to the states. So when we're talking about these small areas or geographic areas, we're really talking about census tabulation blocks, and blocks are the smallest geography that the Census Bureau produces. We're also talking about voting districts or precincts or wards. There's a lot of vocabulary out there, and we refer to them as voting districts, as well as legislative and congressional districts. So the redistricting data program is done every decade, and it may be done differently every decade. We design the program ahead of time. So at the start of 2030, we'll be establishing our program criteria, identifying the tabulations that states need to perform their redistricting. Very important to say, we conduct the program in a nonpartisan manner, and we deliver the tabulations to the governor, the state legislative, public bodies having the responsibility for redistricting no later than 1 year from Census Day. This decade is different, and we'll get into that more. So, back in early 2012, 2013, the 2020 Redistricting Data program was established. And for 2020, 5 phases of the program were identified. So the first phase is the Block Boundary Suggestion Project, aka BBSP. Phase 2 is the Voting District Project, VTD. Phase 3 is the data delivery, and that's where we're at now, where we released the Public Law 94-171 Redistricting Data Tabulations, as well as the Geographic Support Products. Starting in January of 2022, we'll begin collecting the new 118th Congressional District Plans and the State Legislative District Plans. Phase 4 is ongoing through the decade as we make updates every 2 years. And lastly, we have Phase 5, which is the evaluation of the 2020 Redistricting Data Program. We talk to the states, we solicit recommendations for 2030, and begin the planning for the 2030 Redistricting Data Program. A part of this presentation is really going to go over phases 1, 2, and 3. I'm not really going to go over Phase 4 or Phase 5 at this time. So Phase 1, Block Boundary Suggestion Program. So the Block Boundary Suggestion Project is our first geographic updates of the 2020 Redistricting Data Program. We ran the program for the initial phase in 2016. The states submitted the data, we inserted it into the MapTiger database, and we sent the data back to the states so they could perform verification in 2017. The really important mission of the Block Boundary Suggestion Project is users could flag edges within the MapTiger database that should be held as block boundaries or should not be held as block boundaries, so they could really shape their redistricting efforts. So in this example we have on this slide, you can see several roads and they're highlighted in blue. These roads were set, the participant said, these should be held as block boundaries. We need to split these areas to maintain communities of interest. This is how we need to create our redistricting geography. The outlines in red, you can see there are 3 reservoirs. And here the participant was, I do not want a reservoir as a census block. There's no population, it's a small area. Please do not hold this as a block boundary. So again, this allowed our users to say what they needed and what they didn't need. In terms of block boundary flagging, we did have some requirements. Participants couldn't flag boundaries as do not hold or interstate. So we did have some rules, but generally we allowed the states to delineate what they need for their redistricting needs. In addition to the block boundary suggestion updates, users could also provide updates to other geographic features. A big part of this was the supplying boundary corrections and annexations. We collect legal boundary corrections and annexations at the census through the Boundary and Annexation Survey. It's done on a yearly basis. When we're working with our redistricting liaisons, they may not be affiliated with the people making the Boundary and Annexation Survey updates, and they may see issues with boundary corrections and annexations that are needed. So we allowed the state redistricting liaisons to submit boundary corrections and annexations to us, and we passed those to the Boundary and Annexation Survey team so they could adjudicate them. But we wanted to give our participants more ways to participate and make updates that they need for their purposes. In addition to the boundary corrections, they could also add, delete, or modify linear features, roads, railroads, power lines. For example, they may need to add a rear lot line to create a block around a community of interest. So they would add the rear lot line, which we did not have, and then they could flag it as a must hold. They could also add features that were missing, such as subdivisions or features we didn't collect. In addition to the linear features, they could add, delete, or modify area features, including parks, college campuses, and correctional facilities. I want to talk about census blocks a little bit. So again, I'm sure you guys are familiar, census blocks, we call them the atomic unit. I like to think of them as Legos. They're the building blocks of all the geographic boundaries that the Census Bureau tabulates data for, and we generate them every 10 years. So the census blocks were released in January of this year, and we'll be using those until December of 2029. So to generate the tabulation blocks, we use an algorithm which assigns edges in the MapTiger database values and a way of ranking if the edge should be held as a block boundary or not. So in terms of values, boundaries for geographic entities have the highest value. Municipalities, states, counties, school districts, census designated places, congressional districts, voting districts, all of those features, the boundaries are held as block boundaries, which are important. Moving down through the list, primary roads have a higher value than neighborhood roads. Neighborhood roads have a higher value than service roads or ramps. And roads generally have a higher value than invisible edges or power lines. And as a part of the Block Boundary Suggestion Project, when our participants flag their edges as must-holds, they were automatically added to the boundary category where they would be held. In addition, to aid our participants in identifying block boundaries, we also created something called the prototype block shapefile. Like I said, I went to Penn State. I had to use Center County. These were created as a part of the Tigerline Partnership shapefiles that we release every winter to our participants for geographic update operations. And basically what we did, we took all the edges within the county and we ran the block algorithm on them to give the participants a good idea of what their blocks would look like if we delineated the blocks at that time. And this really allowed our participants to make targeted block boundary updates with the must hold and do not hold flags. Moving on from phase 1, we moved into the voting district project, which is phase 2. So at the census, we consider voting districts an ephemeral geography. We don't collect and maintain them throughout the decade. We collect them before the census so they can be a part of the block delineation process, and then we remove them. So we really want to work with our participants to make sure that we're getting the right data in and the most updated voting districts. So the initial phase of voting districts, where we collected them from the states, was in 2018. And again, we ingested the data and then sent it back for verification twice. Once in 2019 and for one last shortened time in 2020, just to make sure that we got everything right and there haven't been changes to the voting districts. In addition to the voting districts, they could do all the updates that were happening in phase 1. They could continue to do block boundary flagging, boundary corrections and annexations, and adding, deleting, or modifying linear features and area features. So I'd be remiss if I'm talking about just these redistricting geographic updates. Before 2020, a lot is happening at the Bureau. A lot of updates are being made. So in addition to the voting districts and block boundary flagging, we're also having the boundary and annexation survey updates come through GEO. We do the local update of census addresses, where we allow communities to review and comment on the Census Bureau residential address list ahead of the census. We also have the Participant Statistical Areas program, where statistical boundaries are updated, such as census designated places, tracts, block groups. And lastly, we have school district updates, and school district updates are maintained by MapTiger. So when we think about the block algorithm and how boundaries are held as block boundaries, we have to remember that through redistricting updates, so voting districts and block boundaries, and then these geographic updates, we have a lot of updates happening to boundaries. So we take a lot of time at the end to reconcile boundaries and make sure that we're not creating small blocks and that everything looks good. It's an intense process. Oh, cue the trumpets, da 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 da. For national census blocks in 2020, there were 8,174,955. You can see that is a decrease from 2010, where we had over 11 million blocks. And some people might say, how did you get rid of 3 million census blocks? I'm concerned. Don't be concerned yet. We'll talk about it over the next few slides. You can see that the 2020 census block numbers do align with the 2000 and 1990. 2000 was in the 8 million range and 1990 was in the 7 million range. So since I'm talking to Pennsylvania, I want to give a shout out to Pennsylvania. So for Pennsylvania census blocks in 2020, you had 336,985. And again, you're seeing the same decrease that we saw at the national level. This was about a 20% reduction in blocks. However, again, like in 2000 and 1990, the numbers are similar. So let's it's great to show tables and talk about things, but I want to show an example, and I think this really hammers home what we're talking about here. Again, Pennsylvania examples, I know, but this is a really good example. Other people on my team are using it, so I'm very happy to have it. So this is Pittsburgh International Airport, and these are the 2010 census block boundaries. I didn't include edges or roads. These are just purely the boundaries. So if you look in the center of the screen, that's where the airport terminal and parking lots are. And you can see every access road, the roads to arrivals, departures, on-ramps, off-ramps, roads that aren't open to the public were all held as census block boundaries. So in this area over the airport campus, we're probably looking about 20 census blocks that have zero population or are very small in area and really don't serve any purposes in the redistricting process. So when we look at 2020, you can see, again, these are the blocks and they're in green. You can see that we were able to dissolve all those blocks on Pittsburgh Airport campus. And the airport itself is now one block. And that's fine. We don't have a resident population there. We don't really need to break that down and create many Legos, if you will, blocks, Legos for the airport. And when we compare 2010 and 2020, you can really see the difference. So I think this is a good example to share just to show that, yes, there was a reduction in blocks, but it's mainly a reduction in blocks like this. Okay, so phase 1 and phase 2, those are our geographic updates to really prepare for the data delivery and stuff. So now I'm going to go into phase 3. So this is the delivery timing slide. So for phase 3, we released the Public Law 94-171 Redistricting Data Summary File, as well as Geographic Support Products to aid the use of the summary file. Back in 2018, as a part of the 2018 test for the census, we created prototype Geographic Support Products and Redistricting Data Summary Files for Providence County, Rhode Island. They were released in 2019 and they're still available, and I'll get to them in a bit. For the official data, we were originally supposed to release the Geographic Support Products starting in November of last year through February 1st. However, we were delayed and we released the Geographic Support Products from January 22nd of this year through February 12th. In terms of the Redistricting Data Summary File, we were originally going to release it to the states on a flow basis from February 18th to March 31st of this year. We could not meet this deadline. So we understand that some states need their redistricting data sooner than later. So the decision was made that we will release the redistricting data in 2 ways. It is the same data, I want to say that off the bat, but it's 2 different formats. So by August 16th, 2021, we're going to release the PL94 Redistricting Data Summary Files in the legacy format. This is a format that we used in 2010 and requires some extraction by the data user for use. Additionally, by September 30th, we're going to release the Public Law 94-171 Redistricting Summary Data Summary Files via data.census.gov. So I'm going to talk about this over the next few slides, just really clarify and answer your questions ahead of time, hopefully. So we talk about the PL 94-171 redistricting data tabulations. So we released 6 tables. If you're familiar with redistricting in 2010, you'll recognize the first 5 tables. Tables P1 and P2 are based on total population for race and ethnicity. Tables P4 and P3 and P4 are based on race and ethnicity for the voting age population, which is 18 years or over. We also have an occupancy status table, as well as a group quarters table. So all of these tables are produced at multiple geographies, including census blocks, so you can really target the data you need, the data that's needed for redistricting. I'm going to talk more about the group quarters table in the next few slides, but it's important to note that group quarters is total population only. There's no demographic breakdown. So here's a little sample of what you'll be seeing. So for tables P1 and P3, these are the race tables. On the census form, people could indicate that what race they were, as well as if they were a combination of up to 6 races. The races include white, Black or African American alone. Sorry, that's Black or African American, American Indian, and Alaskan Native, Asian, Native Hawaiian, or other Pacific Islander, or some other race. So when you're filling out the census form, you can say, I am one race, I am two, and it goes all the way to population of 6 races. And we break out the counts for each permutation. And again, this is for both race tables. The first one is for the total population, and the second is for the voting age population. So again, like the earlier slide, this is table P2 and P4, and these are the ethnicity slides, Hispanic or Latino, or not Hispanic or Latino by race for the total population, and again, the voting age population. And again, you can see it goes through the permutations of ethnicity and race and breaks down the counts, and these are used for redistricting. For the other tables, like I said, we have table H1, which is the occupancy status, and the universe is all housing units, and it identifies the total number of housing units if they're occupied or vacant. And P5, which is the new addition to the redistricting tables, is the group quarters population by group quarters type. So when we're talking about group quarters, we're talking about institutional populations such as correctional facilities for adults, juveniles, nursing facilities, skilled nursing facilities, and other institutional facilities. And for non-institutionalized, we're talking university student housing, military quarters. So we really want to give the right tools to our participants so they can get the numbers they need to perform their redistricting. So back to the data delivery. Again, we have the legacy format file release, which will be released via FTP by August 16th, 2021. And we have the user-friendly form summary files, which will be mailed to the official state recipients on physical media by September 30th, 2021. When we're talking about official recipients, we're talking about governors, state legislative leaderships, both minority and majority, redistricting commission chairs, if there is a commission in the state, as well as our nonpartisan state liaisons. In addition to the physical media, the USB drive and the disk, we'll release the data via data.census.gov for everyone, which will be done by September 30th of this year. So our legacy format summary files, this is our early release by August 16th. And this has always been a part of the 2020 Census Product Plan, but we were able to identify that we can get this data together earlier to help our stakeholders and liaisons. We've had this format since at least 2000. Like I said, it does require some additional handling to properly extract the data. However, the data is fully reviewed and cleared for publication, and the data is the same as what will be released at the end of September. So to aid the legacy format summary files, we have a web page on our redistricting data office website, and you can see that we link to the summary file technical documentation. We also link to the prototype data. I discussed that it was created as a part of the 2018 test, but you can use that prototype data and the support materials such as the Access database shell. We just added SAS shells and other documentation to start playing with the data, get a feel for it, get a feel for extracting it. So we wanted to make sure that we made sure that we let you guys know that that is available for everyone. So even though the legacy format summary files are the same as we've had since 2000, there are some formatting updates. For the formatting for 2020, there are 4 relationship tables, including the geo header and the data segments needed. The biggest change is that all tables are stored as pipe delimited text files. In 2010, the geo header was a fixed width format and data segments were comma delimited, but now everything is pipe delimited, which is easier for use. For 2020 formatting, the geo header must be used together with the data segments, but we've added a geocode field again for ease of use for our users. So that was the legacy format file. Moving forward with the September release data, it will be released on data.census.gov, and this is the official data browsing tool for both official recipients and the public, and all census data will be housed at this site. So our users can really create custom filters and query the data that they need. like the example on the slide says, you could easily identify the number of voting age residents by race or ethnicity in each block within a census tract, county, or the entire state. And these numbers are important for redistricting and constructing new congressional and state legislative districts. In addition, once you have your filters set up, you can easily view, map, and download the data sets of your interest and the ones that you need. So I want to take a few minutes to talk about the other side of the Phase 3 data delivery, which are the Redistricting Data Geographic Products. So we release shapefiles, maps, block assignment files, and block-to-block relationship files as a part of this suite that went out earlier this year. So here are a list of all the redistricting data shapefiles that we've released. You might notice that we have state-based shapefiles, county-based shapefiles, and county-based relationship tables. And you might notice that there is duplication between the state and county-based shapefiles. We have blocks at the state level, we have blocks at the county level. This is just a way to provide our users the data they need. If someone's at the state level, we don't want to have to make them merge all 67 counties of blocks to look at the state level. And if someone's in a small municipality, we don't want them to have to extract their data from 67 counties. Again, standby Pennsylvania examples. In addition to having duplication of the shapefiles at the state and county level, we also included 2010 data with the shapefiles. Again, we wanted ease of use for our participants where they could easily view what the data was like in 2010 and in 2020 for any comparisons or observations they need to make or questions that they have. So we also have our PL 94-171 maps. They're in PDF form. And the maps are created at the county level for census blocks, census tracts, and school districts. What's important to note is for the census block maps, every block within the county is visible. There are no non-visible blocks. So a state can see every block in the county and then review all the blocks in the state if they're interested, but it is all there. We also have maps that are created at the district level for state legislative districts for the state house and state senate. In 2010, they were mapped at the county level, but we realized they should be mapped at the district level because they might not conform to county boundaries. So we also have our tabular data that we release. So we have the block assignment file and name lookup table. And basically, the block assignment file lists all the blocks and can be joined to the name lookup table, which are helpful for our participants. Geography types include the ones listed below, congressional districts, places, your typical boundaries. And we also include a block-to-block file, block-to-block relationship file for easy reference or a crosswalk between the 2010 data and the 2020 data. So you might be asking, I've seen a lot, where do I get this data? So this is a screenshot of our census RDO page. You can see we have our link to the decennial PL 94-171 redistricting data files, and that will be a link when the official data is released in August and then September. And on the redistricting data program management page, that's where you can access the prototype data and other information regarding the legacy files. I'm not going to read this slide, but I wanted to include this because this is the links for the maps that I showed, some additional links for information, just a good thing to have in your back pocket. And I got through it. I want to thank you guys for the time, and I look forward to the conversation and questions that we're going to have. So I'm going to close my presentation and hop back into Teams.
Sorry, we do have a question. Can you explain where college students were captured this year? Were they captured at their colleges or were they captured at home, given the pandemic sent many of them home?
So I can give a basic answer to this, but I might need to follow up with you more. The college students were supposed to respond to where they were at Census Day, April 1st, 2021. So I think there are a variety of places where college students were captured this year. I can get you a better answer. This is a little out of my expertise. I know that's silly as I was talking about it on the slides, but we can get your information and get you a better answer.
Yeah, and I'll just add that I know the Census Bureau did a tremendous amount of work, and I know what they were working on because they asked for our assistance. They actually reached out to colleges and universities, during the pandemic time so that they could get accurate information about those students that would have been living on campus had the pandemic not sent them home.
Thank you for the assist on that.
Sure, no worries. We've had that question quite a bit.
I can imagine.
Well, Jenny, I have a question for you. And first, I want to say thank you again. I want to echo Jen's sentiment about helping us make it through this decade. Do you see that the rise of GIS technology and the use of that, of those services improved the process this decade?
Yes, I will say yes. And I will answer this in terms of it helped us internally at the Census Bureau. I know a lot of effort went up to 2020 on improving our roads network, getting better imagery and stuff. So when we were working with the states who have their own imagery and their own GIS systems, it was much easier to integrate and work together on it. I think it was mutually beneficial for both the census and our participants.
That's good to hear. So Molly asks, you mentioned there will be a few delays with the release of the data. How much of a delay can we expect?
So the data, the redistricting summary files will be released in the legacy format by August 16th, 2021. And the more user-friendly summary files data will be released by September 30th. So that's the delay from the March 31st release that we planned on originally.
Awesome, thank you. And then Jared asks, will the new urban area classifications affect redistricting?
I do not believe they will. I am actually not sure. I know from the census perspective, it won't affect it on our end, but I'm not sure about participants. So I might have to get back to you guys with that answer. Okay.
So we have then another question from Jake. Given the various controversies over the census in 2020, do you anticipate lawsuits regarding redistricting?
I'm not really going to answer that question, but I think it will be a hot topic.
Yes. Okay, we have another question from Mike. Will we be able to download single county data, or will we have to download the entire Commonwealth and extract our county?
So in terms of the geographic support products, they'll be available at the county-wide level. With the redistricting data, if you use data.census.gov, you can incorporate your county into your filter and query. For the legacy format files, you probably will have to do some manipulation to extract your county. And if any more questions are coming in, I will follow up on the urban area classification. And I can correspond with Jen, and Tim to get the answer. Does that work?
Yes, that'd be great. Thank you. Okay, we do have another question. Is the data for all states being released at once? Because last decade they were released over, a rolling schedule.
So for the releases in August and September, it will all be released at once. We originally planned on having a flow basis starting in February to March, and that flow was based on state redistricting timelines. Some have earlier redistricting timelines, so we tried to get the data to them first and then roll it out. But since that plan is not happening, both the August and September release will be nationwide.
Looks like we have some more downtime, so I guess I'll keep picking your brain. Was there anything that was interesting about this decade that is not related to COVID?
Well, this is my first redistricting data program, so that was definitely interesting to begin with. Again, I'm a geographer, I'm a nerd, I work for the Census Bureau, but I'm really excited for participants to see the blocks and how clean the data is. We haven't really had any complaints. The data looks good, and I always feel like the more we can tell people that Tiger is good and we have good data and good shapefiles, the happier that makes me.
Yeah, everything I've seen looks really great, so.
Thank you.
Thank you for your hard work.
There were nights I dreamed about it. So. Cool. Looks like I might be off the hot seat just in time. First presentation and you're still on the agenda, so that's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't see any more questions coming through, so just a kind of a last call.
And if anybody's typing, I will say this, feel free to reach out to us. My last name's a bit of a big one, but you can always email us at RDO, Redistricting Data office at census.gov. And there's a few of us, we continually check for those emails. So if you have questions later or you see later presentations, feel free to reach out. We want to have these conversations and we want to make sure the right answers are getting out.
Looks like we have no additional questions coming in. So we just want to say another big thank you to Jenny for joining us today. And once again, for all of her assistance as we prepared Pennsylvania's files for the redistricting program.
Thanks for having me. Have a great day. I hope you have a great conference.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. Bye.